6:46 p.m. on February 22nd, 2021. The first thing that we have, I don't think we have any minutes on the agenda. Just let me flip over to it real quick. No, actually, we're going to jump right into with Tony on revenue. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I know we just had a meeting just 6 days ago.
Nate, thanks for the reminder.
I should have sent it out earlier. It's kind of like coaching youth sports a little bit, Susie. You know how it is.
And that's the part I don't miss.
That is good.
Right? How come you didn't send us an email? And they reminded us of the practice we have every Wednesday. Tony, you have something you're going to share with us?
I do. I was just waiting to make sure you were ready to go.
No, we're ready to go.
All right.
You got our attention.
You have to make me a co-host.
Gotcha.
Okay. So in 2018, shortly after, well, I think it was my second budget, we established a revenue sharing policy, and the percentages were based on where the school budget was in 17 and what was the town's budget. So we looked at what the total budget was, what the school's portion was in 17. We came up with a percentage. So at the time, I'm just kind of making yellow here so you can see it. At the time, the split was 49% school, 51% town. So from that point on, what we said was, we had a meeting with the school department. What we said was, look, at going forward, whatever we have for revenue, we're going to share based on this modeling. That will allow you to know what we can afford without negatively impacting the general fund operations, because we are all understood, and there was a presentation done to the council, that over an 11-year period, the average revenue increased 3.2%. And in order to try to plan and be more predictable, the town manager, and with support of the council, we came up with this revenue sharing, just so that we could look forward and understand where our revenue streams were going. We also then began to expand on the budget resolution document, which you now see kind of highlights what the objectives of the town manager are at a high level, and what the reserve targets are. So that further put this revenue sharing model in context, right? Because we want some surplus at the end of the year.
Excuse me 1 second, Tony. Am I supposed to be seeing something on my screen right now?
Yeah.
I don't see anything.
I don't have any document in front of me. I'm sorry.
How about now?
Do you see this? Oh, there it is. I got it.
Oh, geez,
good.
my screen just went blank on me. Apologize. Thank you for that.
That's okay.
So the 5149 was the calculation. There's nothing on the screen I'm just going to point to now the revenue. I'm giving you the backstory on this. So One, we said we need to share revenue and look at predictability on how it will impact police, fire, as well as school, for instance. We also looked at what do we want to have at the end of the year, so we have some reserves so we can start to build on replacing some of our capital. And then thirdly, we said we need to get a stabilization fund up to a balance so that if we hit an economic downturn, we'll be able to draw on that in order to maintain current level of services. And I think this is a good time to point to that, because that's why we were able to pull out $1.6 million in our rainy day fund or our stabilization fund. So when we set this model up, we looked at the three major revenue categories, right? Your levy limit, your state receipts, and your local receipts. So the property taxes, what we would call economic growth revenue, meaning if there's more building, more development, more commercial, you're going to get something above your proposition 2.5%. So when we created our revenue sharing, we said, okay, last year, this is what we committed in taxes. And here's your 2.5% increase. And I'm using FY22. This is the preliminary budget numbers. And we said, okay, in this case, it would be new growth about 800. We have to put monies away for allowances for abatements and exemptions when taxpayers seek for an abatement. And I can explain what abatement is if you have a question, versus an exemption. Then we can never raise it to our full capacity. There's always a rounding, and this is the DOR's website, nothing we do. And then some of the funds coming out of this revenue now are part of our district incentive financing, our DIF, where we use to pay down the debt for the Elm Street bond. We also get a monies back from the prior year for certain exemptions that the state pays part of that for. So we also put that in there to come up with what our total projected revenue for property taxes is. And in this case, the difference between 22 and 21, based on our preliminary estimate, was $1.8 million. Then we look at the cherry sheet estimates, particularly the unrestricted general fund aid that comes from the DOR, the state, excuse me, and then state-owned land. That's another chunk of money that comes from the state for land owned by the state where we can't tax that property. And you can see that's a pretty considerable number. And that got us $4,385,537. The change from last year was $822, roughly $822,000. And then we go to our local receipts. So in our local receipts, the economically driven numbers are your motor vehicle excise tax, your meals and boat tax, penalties and on interest. We factor those in because that penalty and interest is on those taxes that you're collecting. So we figure that has to do with an economic condition. Actually, sometimes penalties and interests are up when the economic condition is bad, and they're down when the economic conditions are good, but we share that revenue in the revenue sharing model. This 5,121 is a nominal amount, but it has to do with Bridgewater State. And in fact, there's some properties that we get some payment in lieu of taxes on. I'm sorry, take that back, not Bridgewater. Bridgewater is another method. That is in fact from the housing for the elderly in the town of Bridgewater. There's a nominal amount paid every year for that taxes on that property. The state provides us. Then there's your license and permits. The big ones, the building, the wiring, the plumbing, all those are tied to economic growth. So as you're developing more, you are going to generate more in the area of licenses and permits. Now, last year we had stabilization funds, so there was an amount in there. If we pull our stabilization fund money out and compare to the prior year, and we factor in the increases from FY 21, it's actually net to the negative $57,000. Now, the reason at this point in time we're not touching the stabilization fund, because we did push up our local receipt revenue considerably. And at this point in time, I'm not comfortable in pushing that up even further. And then when we start to look at our revenue sharing, the numbers are not impacted in a drastic way negatively. So what does that mean? It means that of that 1,769,919 in additional revenue for FY22, 51% would be allocated to the general fund, and that's 902,659. And this was based on the revenue estimating, excuse me, that's the number Julie was asking for, the preliminary budget. And 867,260 is the number for the school. That's where we had arrived at. So to sum it up, property taxes, state receipts, local receipts, the difference from one year to the next based on a calculation in 2017 that said 51% of the budget at that point in time was allocated to the town general fund, non-school, and I say non-school, the regional school district, and 49 at that time was for the regional school district. And so that's how we came up with the revenue sharing model. And we've stuck to that. The last 2 years, however, because there's been an additional monies initially for just capital, and has always been my position, and I've communicated that is a one-time that can be used for any capital that the school had. There's talk about moving that money into the revenue allocation. If I was to move that money into this, and I was to add 100, and I think roughly 38,000, it's going to shift this revenue sharing model. And in fact, not using it for one-time expenditures like capital and moving it into the base for the school, that is in fact changing the revenue sharing model. Although I know that the powers that be don't necessarily have a concern about that, insofar as they're willing to, at least right now, some of the council members are saying we want to get that 138 into the base for the school. My position will be, as long as you know you're changing the revenue sharing model, and you're already, and to do so is going to start to erode this revenue split. If we were to look at capital as a separate item, and in a discussion, I think coming up with the school this week, I would be, looking to say to the town manager and to the superintendent is, let's start to plan out what you're going to need for capital. Let's go out 2 to 3 years so that you can feel confident that those monies are going to be available. And let's ensure that there's really no capital within your operating budget. And if we do that, I think we can accomplish both things at once, i.e. making sure there's a steady stream of dollars for capital, as well as steady stream of dollars for the operational budget. So that was the thought process. It's a simple calculation. It isn't rocket science, because municipal finance isn't all that complicated. It's making the decisions and how you allocate that revenue, which becomes a complicated exercise. And that's with over 20 years worth of experience in this business. It's really not that complicated. The revenue streams are not that complex. They're as simple as I laid out. And it was an attempt to create some order around how we share the resources that are available in the town of Bridgewater. I'll take any questions that you have.
Tony, if you could refresh my memory, the state-owned land, that is considered non-recurring, right?
Nope. This straight-owned land, no. That piece is actually an annual calculation. It's an annual amount. That is actually where the state owns vast parcels of land that are not developed. typically open space. And in fact, there's as you can imagine, many parcels that the state owns, and they do an annual calculation to determine what portion, and it's a percentage of the acreage, let's use it simple math, of the entire acreage in the state of Massachusetts that the state owns. And our portion is a portion of that, and therefore we get a portion of the allocation from the state for state-owned land. And so that's an annual amount. It increased the last few years based on the calculations, how it worked out, plus the town of Bridgewater did sell a number of parcels of land to the state that the treasurer collector and the assessor and myself and the town manager were involved in. It worked out really well. We got some back taxes off the books. The state got the land, and the land really wasn't developable, and therefore wouldn't generate a lot of additional taxes going forward. So we do get revenue in return.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of undevelopable area, I should say. Does this include the university too?
The land
Undeveloped
value,
land of the
yes.
university? Yeah,
The,
okay.
the land, and in this case, it does include the school, but again, it's just the land value. It doesn't get into the buildings or anything that's on it. So there's an example of the land value where it's part of the calculation, but anything else within that, like there would for a commercial enterprise, none of that is valued for tax purposes.
So no improvements to the property are valued. Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Does anybody else have a question for Tony at this point? I know for some of us before.
I don't know.
No?
Tony, Mike, that 135 where you said it's going to, that 138 that may change the allocation, when will that be decided, or who would decide if?
Well, I think it's a
Yeah.
process. There'll be a discussion, but with the school, there'll be a discussion with Mr. Dutton and the council members. It will come up for discussion. Technically, the council members can't adjust revenue. They can make recommendations to adjust budgets. So how that plays out, hopefully we'll come to a resolution on how we're going to handle that, so that's a win-win. I'm encouraged that we can, especially with the reserves I see coming out of the end of the operation for FY21, and what we can then put into our capital stabilization fund, and how we can work the capital plan to include the regional school district.
So was there miscommunication last year when that money was allocated, that additional
No.
138, or whether
No.
or not it was going to be included in?
There was
The
no
base number or no?
miscommunication on my part whatsoever.
I didn't say who miscommunicated, I just said miscommunication, just
I
asking.
don't, yeah, but then I can't speak for anyone else.
Okay, no, that's fair. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, does anybody else have anything else for Tony on the subject of revenue sharing? Okay, I think we're good. We will move on to the next item, which actually a few meetings back, Tony, if you could stay on too for this real quick, since it'll impact you. I believe it was Kathy, right? Made a suggestion that when it comes to certain things that we get regular reports. Kathy, I'm gonna let you take it from here real quick. What were your thoughts? Because they were good
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah, I guess it was twofold, right? One was just the regular monthly reporting that we have not been getting consistently. And I'm not saying that that's not coming from Tony, but somehow something in the process is not ending with us seeing the reports. And even the same thing with like the budget. We didn't see the budget for weeks after it was announced the town council already had it. So that was one of the things. And then the second thing was, do we come up with some kind of a I'm going to use the word criteria, that says if we approve X number of dollars, or we just say we keep a running list, and then we say when a project or a order comes to us, we can sort of say, do we want to have regular updates on that particular item? And we add it to the list. And then we get quarterly or semi-annual or whatever it is updates. And I think we were talking about things like the High Street Dam project, the memorial building. Did I call it the right thing? The memorial
Yeah.
building project, the sewer project, even the water project. Like there's so many, these really large projects that we sort of approve these hundreds of thousands of dollars of expenditure, and then we never hear anything else about them. So that was, I think, sort of, do we want to come up with a criteria and say over X amount of dollars, or like I said, just keep a running list and add them regularly to our agenda to get updates?
So can I answer the first question?
Go ahead.
So Nate, I believe you and I spoke about this when we had our meeting a few weeks back, looking at the calendar. So it's been made real clear to my staff that between the 20th to the 25th of the month, that report will go out, whether it's the monthly or the quarterly. Today, we went through it all. We prepared it all. There's some minor changes that someone caught in our own QC process that will get cleaned up tomorrow. Those reports will be issued. They'll be issued by Laurie Garini. She issues them. She'll issue them to Mr. Dutton. She'll issue them for his distribution to the council. She'll issue them to Josh and Nate. And that's the protocol. So if you, for some reason, do not get it from Josh or Nate, or you receive them, or you don't get it by the 25th, then something's amiss.
So I guess the question that I would have is, would it be just as simple to create a distribution list for this team? Doesn't change very often, and just have her, instead of sending it to Josh and Nate and having another step in the process where they have to send it to us, why couldn't she just send it to a distribution list and we all get it?
Well, I appreciate you saying now we have a list, Kathy. That wasn't always the case.
Well, I mean, but our team doesn't,
Well,
our group.
that's why it didn't change. But if your chair and Josh want it that way, we have no problem sending it to 20 people. It's no skin off our nose.
Because one thing that came out of our conversation was that I get included in all distributions from your office.
That's right.
So that's about 3 weeks old. All right.
That's right.
Because one of the biggest concern, and we've always had this problem where information doesn't seem to quite make it down to us. And that's one thing we're trying to improve. And so hopefully now moving forward, this has happened. I should now start receiving the monthly reports. All right. And I have no problem distributing to the committee once I receive them.
Yeah. And if for some reason you guys decide as a group that that's how you want to do it differently, and that's your prerogative, just give us the.
Well, you know, and I honestly don't have any issue with the monthly reports just going out to the whole committee.
Good.
There's no
Good.
reason for really, if we can do it that way, you know, I'm going on the exception sometimes that everything should come through the secretary, at least informally.
Mhm.
But I have no problem with those reports going directly to the full committee.
Yeah, and just know that Josh is the official record keeper of your documents. So he has to be there. So send me, Josh, the list of everyone's emails, and we will add that to the finance committee's distribution on this.
Okay.
Great.
Like I said, none of that bothers me. It works good.
Another step forward in clear communication. Great.
the other thing that you mentioned, we can, one thing that we haven't given you guys, and that's a shame on us. I'm gonna add another report. And maybe we need to add a series of other reports, but let's just start with the capital fund. So whenever we make an appropriation for a particular capital project, I'm gonna talk about smaller ones, 50,000, 100,000 in the general fund. We track them in a special capital fund. So we can give you a monthly update on that as well. As a matter of fact, I'm going to send something to email to Laurie right now and CC Josh and Nate. We'll add that as a separate distribution. Capital reports. General fund. So we'll get that going. And that might give you a list that you were referring to, Kathy, of certain projects you want to be tracking. You might, on that capital project list, might be something for $25,000 and you really don't care about an update on it, but there might be something there for 100,000 that you would like to be informed of. So we'll do that. How's that?
So that will be a monthly distribution too, Tony?
That is correct. And we'll send that out on a monthly distribution. And then as far as the appropriations that you want to be tracking, if what we can do you guys have a list of all the orders that you've approved over the last 9 to 12 months?
Not at our
They're out
fingertips.
on the town council site. We can find them easily.
Yeah, if you guys just came up with a list of what you wanted to have an update, and then I would just create a list that says who's going to update you on this. I will distribute that to the town manager. In some cases, like let's say the water treatment plant. Well, that would be a little more complex because that in itself could be a whole hour-and-a-half meeting if you really wanted a full update on it. You know, we're able to ask questions. So I'm also wary of your time, but if you put that on the list and you guys wanted to meet and you want to get that on an agenda, I will make that happen. And then we'll have to decide who we have to speak on it. So it might be our OPM that handles the whole project, or it might be the town manager coming in, or it might be Jonas, one of the three. All right, so I will be happy to do that.
Well, shouldn't all those things be on the list you're going to give us if they're capital projects?
No, see, this again, we have a number of capital, as I said, one's general fund, and that's what I was just speaking to. When it comes to these other funds, these are multi-million-dollar funds. There's a lot more involved. We have never given a detailed report on that. Doesn't mean we shouldn't or won't. It just means another level of meeting time, review time, and really a definition of the roles and responsibilities. So for instance, the town manager, Jonas, and the OPM are managing that project. Maybe you can help me, but what sort of questions are you having? Are we under budget? Are we over budget? With the operating fund of the general budget, being over and under budget is an important thing for you to know, because you may be asked to make some financial decisions on those. If we're under budget under the water treatment plant, it probably might be helpful, but I don't know if at some point you're going to get overwhelmed with all of these projects. And again, I'm happy to give you all of it. Except for this going to take a while to create reports that are easy for you to look at. And we have to download things into Excel because the munis reports are just not very helpful in really telling the story. So
Hey,
if
guys,
yes, Go ahead.
Sorry, Tony, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Please.
I'm just kind of reacting to all these different things that you're mentioning could be shared, but I
Here's the
appreciate you don't
thing.
want to.
We could share everything. If I shared every single financial report on all the funds in towns, you would be inundated with information.
So where I was going with this is, I remember when I first joined this committee, there was an attempt to try and get us all access to a SharePoint folder. Whatever happened to that? I mean, that also might be helpful where there's this, shared drive that we can have access to versus people constantly emailing things out. And there could just be, I don't know, an email just to reference that, this has been shared or et cetera.
I think
So-
that's a real good question. And I would say, Josh, you should put that through an IT request with Kimberly. That's outside of my
But
realm.
we have one.
Mhm.
Right,
You
but that's what I'm
created-
saying.
It was created,
Yeah.
I think Laurie created it, and she was at one point putting stuff out there.
The way it
I was not able to access it, so I tried a few times to interact with IT support, and it never really went anywhere, and I just kind of gave up, and then I forgot about it. So yeah, I'm just wondering if that exists, let's dust it off. Maybe that's a better alternative.
As I said, Josh, if you would reach out to Kimberly and Brad and have them make sure that's functioning. I think every time there's a new member, it has to be updated to give access. And then as far as where those documents were going, initially they would go to Josh and he was going to maintain that. We can certainly distribute them to that file, but I'd have to check to see for records retentions whether or not that will be the official box of the Finance Committee. And if that's the case, then all your minutes and everything else would go there, because I don't know where Josh is keeping that. So again, that coordination, all that would be with IT. So Josh, if you would reach out to them, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. And Susie, thank you for bringing that up because I thought I remembered that myself in the recesses of my dim memory sometimes. That we
And
did attempt to do that. And there
Yeah.
was some sort of
Yeah.
technical issues and
Yeah.
something
So,
happened.
and Susie, to your real question, let me just get to the bottom of it. We have limited resources, and I've been out without a business analyst for over a year who just came on board 3 weeks ago. My experience has been we haven't had a committee that actually wanted to look at anything above the financials they were getting. So if this group wants to have a report on every fund, I'm more than happy to do it. I will generate the reports so that you guys can look at whichever report you choose to. There are hundreds of funds, but I'd be more than happy to provide that. We provide you with the information that represents 95% of what's going on, except for the water project, which is clearly a significant project. Would you have wanted reports on the Elm Street project? Would you want reports on waterline projects? Would you want reports on the meter project? Would you want reports on the revolving fund, the ambulance fund? Do you want reports on all of those? And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I'm really asking.
No, and I think that's it all makes sense because I feel like some of our challenge here is that there's definitely, and I can only speak for myself as a relatively new person, right? Is that we may not even know all the things that we do want to know about because there hasn't been as much interaction or exposure in the past. But then to your point about, if we get inundated with every single fund, that could almost be too much. So maybe that's
So
something that we need to think
if
about.
someone wants to have a meeting, Susie, yourself and or a couple, your subcommittee, you want to have a meeting, go through some of the funds that you're not getting and which ones you would, I'd be more than happy to do that. But I'd need to know. Because
Yeah.
that's going to take some resources to make sure we compile all that and put it all together.
Yeah, Nathan, maybe we do that, whether it's the budget subcommittee, to look at what's available and then how do we prioritize that? Because there's probably definitely some fund lines that are just, come on, we don't really need to either know about them or they might be so small.
Yep.
But it would be good to look at some of the more prioritized larger areas where we tend to say, oh, well, what's the breakdown in there? And, how do we get the background? So,
That's right. And I would rather see the committee stay a little more focused than, having a fire hose jammed down our mouth, really.
exactly.
And we'd
yeah.
have so much information that it would be less helpful, maybe,
Right.
This is Julie. I know that
Okay,
on the
Julie.
budget subcommittee for the school committee, Kathy Macedo would provide us with monthly, a monthly thing and give us an overview. And then, but we would pick out, but we saw it and then we could ask questions that we had. So if we got it ahead of time, maybe we would only ask on things that maybe jumped out at us. Is that a possibility? And then as far as the full school committee goes, she would report out quarterly, like to the public, but in budget sub, which obviously the public's invited to, but not always present.
Yep.
That's how we handled it from the school committee side. We saw every line item, but we, and we could question any line item in those budget subcommittee meetings. But then when it came, quarterly, she would report out to the the public and at the regular school, monthly school committee meeting. So is there any way to just, I don't know, kids, if you saw like what was budgeted and what was spent, and if there's a huge variance, if we had a question, to your point, we could run it through you, Nate, or Josh, and then bring it up at the next meeting type of thing, or not? Like, is that an option, Tony, or no?
Yeah, I can see where that would be another way to approach it. I would suggest right now, I think that we're off to a good start here now that we're gonna get, monthly reports directly from Tony's office, and we're gonna get, the capital funding directly from him monthly too. I would say just to get started, because it is something I think that we, as a committee, maybe in the subcommittee, we discuss a little bit more. So we talked about, we can be a little more focused on what we're looking at. And I would ask in the meantime, if there are any committee members, if there is something right now that you'd like to take a look at, that you get in touch with me. And Josh, as we mentioned, if we can look at, maybe a different methodology, that secure box through IT, I'd appreciate that too.
So I'm going to give you what's referred to as a fund balance report. So it will give you all the funds with what the available fund balance is. And maybe that would be a list where you could start from, hey, what's this one all about? What's that one all about?
Okay.
And then you can choose, and then we can do some reporting that's the way I would feel comfortable in reporting it, not just dumping out the charges that hit a particular fund.
Right, yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, that sounds like a smart starting point, Tony. If you could do that,
Yeah.
please.
I would be more than happy to do that.
Okay. Anything else more on this particular topic right at the moment? Okay, one thing I would like to do, I forgot to do in the beginning, is we do have a time for public comment. So I am going to take a second and ask if we do have any public comment. And if we do, that you would identify yourself, what street you live on. Any comments, public comments? Okay, moving on, just real quick, we have additional things. Process discussion, financial reports, that's essentially the conversation we just had. Are there any other items under additional committee discussion that anybody would like to bring up for this evening? Okay. Any other questions at all from anybody? All right, we seem to be pretty good for this evening. Okay, so we did bring up our next meeting. We had discussed briefly before we had our quorum, having our next financial committee meeting on Monday, March 8th at 6:30 p.m. The town council is meeting on the 9th, so if there's any recommendations we have to make prior to their meeting, we can get it done. Does that sound good for everyone for the 8th?
Josh, I think we have the GMES meeting that night, right?
Yeah, who else would that take out of the loop?
Just me, I think.
Okay. All right, so Josh, we're gonna go with Monday, March 8th. Don't mean to cut you out, Kathy, but
It's fine.
at 6, I hear you, at 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
Okay, well, I thank you, everybody, for spending your time. Like I said, I know it's the second time in 6 days here that we've gotten together, and I appreciate your time. And I'm sure that the citizens of the town do too. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion, Julie.
Second, Chris.
Second from Chris. Josh, can you do a roll call for us, please?
Yes, Nate,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Kathy,
Aye.
Chris,
Yes.
Susie.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion was approved. The meeting is adjourned.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you,
evening.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tony.
guys. Have a good night.
Thanks.
You too.